So welcome, everyone. I'm Pat Soldano, President of Family Enterprise USA, and I'm very pleased to have with me today Chris Thorkelson, who is the CEO of Lloyd Companies in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I know that you have been with the company for some time, so maybe you could explain a brief history of the company, the business.
Good. So our family business, as you alluded to, is headquartered out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and it started in 1972, actually by my aunt and uncle, Pat and Craig Lloyd. Pat and my mom are sisters, and they actually recently celebrated 50 years of being in business, and we focus on real estate, development, construction, and property management are kind of our main go-to. Pat and Craig actually had 3 daughters who grew up really during the struggles of what many family businesses, face, especially during startup, and really their time that they were, at the age where they kind of understand things was when interest rates had significantly hiked up in the early 80s, and the business was in a lot of residential development at that time. And as we know what kind of happened, it posed its challenges. So they experienced those trying times firsthand, which is why I believe none of them really wanted to be in the family business or even live in Sioux Falls when I came and joined the business in 2003. And eventually all 3 girls came back and became a part of the business by 2007. And in 2008, the family committed to really focusing on succession and transition. And that kind of played out that I would succeed Craig Lloyd as the president and CEO right around 2016, and then turn what we did is we created and established an advisory board during that period that would eventually turn into a governing board of directors when I took over and succeeded Craig. With all family businesses, kind of the challenges when you're that close to one another, and the idea of maybe working for some outside directors was a lot more attractive to me than listening to maybe my cousins complain. So that was very intentional. And then, knowing that we wanted it to live beyond and for many generations to come, that was very important for us. I think when that transition happened, I believe we were around about 100 team members, and we made up about 5 divisions within the organization. And today we're over 400 team members, and we make up right around 13 different divisions within the organization itself.
Well, maybe you could talk a little bit about those divisions, because I know, and a little bit more about the business. I know that you have apartments and office and retail, I believe some industrial. Do you have existing buildings, and then also do you do development?
Yeah, so really Craig and Pat experienced, as I alluded to earlier, some of the trying times during the 80s when the interest rates were up, and they were in multifamily, but they were in, residential, and focused more on residential development. And, Craig found himself in a bit of a pinch at that time, obviously, because lots weren't selling, and he had these developments out there and houses weren't selling. So he thought, ultimately, in order for him to create a business that would, live on for generations to come, he needed to diversify. And so that's when he got more into commercial development, commercial real estate, and a little bit more heavy into multifamily. And so the makeup of our organization, I would say a lot of it is based around control. We're the managing member of any entity that we're involved in. We have right around 200 entities today. We manage 10,000 apartment units, and we got about 2.5 million of commercial square feet, some hotels, but the idea being, how can we be a one-stop shop? And so a lot of what exists within our organization is we raise our own capital. So we have a broker dealer that does that. That would go obviously for the investments into the real estate side. So we've got a development team, we've got an architectural team that all collaborate with in part the construction team, and then we've got property management on the backside, and then also asset management. So it's like a full circle. For the most part, we have all that in-house. We have started to acquire businesses and various ways and means to add to the overall process. Our most recent transaction was the purchasing of a trust company for one to control lumber, as lumber prices were really out of control over the last couple of years, or post pandemic. But it also allows us to incorporate some automation, which is the future. And so we've got a 150,000 square foot facility that will have all new automation in it to do floor trusses, roof trusses, wall panels, and essentially what we're doing out of that is establishing our own lumber yard as well, so we can source our own materials direct and hopefully kind of pinch down on that first cost and hopefully make more competitive rents on the backside.
So do you operate in just South Dakota, or do you have development and investments, acquisitions in other states?
So we're really focused in South Dakota, and we're focused in Iowa would be the two areas, the states that we're most heavily involved. We've dabbled a little bit in the Kansas City area. We can do some stuff occasionally in North Dakota and South Dakota, but our focus right now is those two states. There's a lot of good opportunity for us there. And I think some of the surrounding states is really kind of the area where we'll stick to. It doesn't have its high highs, but it doesn't have its low lows either. So we're kind of boring. We're boring in that regard.
Doesn't sound very boring to me. It sounds like a huge undertaking and enterprise. And I'm sure with 400 team members, that's a big challenge. I mean, that's a big organization to manage. So kudos to you for doing that, and also for the family to actually have a succession plan. As you know, a lot of families struggle with that. Sounds like you've all done a good job in planning for the next generation. So let's talk about the community and the giving and the help that you give your local communities. We have found that 82% of family businesses give locally or to a local chapter of a national charity. So that's really important to the community, as we've learned, because if a family business doesn't exist anymore for whatever reason, it could be estate tax or some other reason, then that local giving all goes away. So maybe you could speak to us a little bit about what you do to help your community as the business.
Yeah, so I probably learned this most, and my parents did what they could, but I've certainly learned it from Pat and Craig and what they give and how much they give back to the community. As a family-owned company, it's very important that we are giving back to the communities where we do business. And so we actually budget for 7.5% of any profits to go back to the communities where those profits resulted from. And then the holdings that I had spoke to earlier, they give around 10% of the returns generated on an annual basis. And then my cousins and Pat and Craig and myself and my family, we give on our own to the things and organizations that we all have passion for. So that's very big, and it's something that is being followed, really kind of a path that Pat and Craig had paid for all of us and set forth. We also give our employees 10 hours of PTO specific to volunteering their time. They're highly encouraged to get involved with nonprofits in the community and or initiatives, and even involvement with their children's activities as much as time allows for them to do so. We also have a division within Lloyd Companies, and kind of the company as a whole. We have the platform to help with housing initiatives and building buildings, and not that we advocate that donor funds go toward buildings, but if it's for the right cause, to build affordable housing units. That's what we do. It's often positioned and focused around clients with nonprofits, for example, groups we've worked with for the chronic homeless, people out of incarceration, single moms, domestic abuse victims, human trafficking survivors, and then just, the general average citizen who needs some form of rental assistance. So it is our purpose to improve quality of life in the communities where we do business. And we know that the future value of the investments that we make in these communities is directly correlated to that vibrancy and, the overall city culture and growth, hopefully positive growth, and, just the sustainability of the city and the people that reside in that community. We are definitely long-term, multi-generational holders of real estate. We don't like to give anything up. And we, alongside many other businesses, and certainly, I'll say Sioux Falls for sure, we're just invested in giving back, and it's very, very important that we do so.
Well, that's very helpful and very interesting. And to that point, I think that helps giving to the community with generating and creating, new employees, bringing on new talent. So we've learned that 72% of family businesses actually have generational employees, meaning more than one generation of employees that work in the business. Now, a lot of family businesses don't know the statistic, but would you suspect, or maybe the statistic in your business, do you have generations of employees working in the business?
Yeah, we do. And the things that I alluded to, our ability to work with those nonprofits is a big attractor and helps us retain, because there's a little bit more of a purpose for what we're doing. But we actually have, really 5 generations that we're working from, all the way from the silent gen to Gen Z, and trying to, well, today's challenge a bit is, trying to get that collaboration with that stretch in there, which is likely somewhat consistent, I would assume, with family businesses. I'll just make fun of, one of my uncles is a silent gen, and, they just don't necessarily go away in family businesses. But we did just have one team member, and she had worked over 40 years at the company. And still to this day, we reach out to her, send, holiday cards, birthdays, the occasional lunch. And then we have many boomers mixed throughout, especially in the property management division. And many that have been 20+ years with us. And that goes back to just the culture that Pat and Craig had created, and the traditions, and, there's a lot that people gravitate towards that. And we actually have a Gen Xer that is 30 years with the company as well. She started when she was 20, and she was with Pat and Craig most of those years. So we've been very fortunate in that regard. And I think some of that has to do with us being a family business. The nice thing is, essentially having the history of how we used to do things, mixing with the younger generations and how they do things today, and that transition of knowledge from one generation to another is imperative in today's world. And as they balance and support one another's experience and knowledge, simply due to the rate of change and how quick the boomers or the silent gen are trying to look to the young Gen Zers and Gen Xers and how to do certain things. So it's good for us. We talked about the succession planning that we're focused on as a family, and how important that is, not only to us, but the investors that we have, the banks that we have relationships, and the communities that we support in the development construction world, and then obviously the 400+ employees, knowing that there's stability there and there's intent and good intent, and that we do focus on it. It's very transparent to all.
Well, that's very, very helpful to know, and really appreciate you as a family and as a business doing that. So let's continue this conversation about employees. While we're through the pandemic, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how did you operate in the pandemic? Did you manage to keep employees? Did you have to lay employees off? I mean, generally found that most family businesses were able to retain most of their employees, if not all their employees. And if they didn't, they brought them back very quickly when the pandemic was starting to subside.
Yeah, unfortunately we launched a hospitality division in 2020. And I still have my job today, so that's good. But none of us knew what was in front of us, and we actually had 4 large hotel developments that we were going to be doing from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Kansas City, Rapid City, South Dakota, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And they were all supposed to start in 2020. And it was probably about 400 million in development construction work that just kind of went away in the middle of March. And so that was the March Madness for us. And that was a really, really tough time and challenge, because we had kind of beefed up per se for all that was coming our way. And it, obviously it all went away because there, you don't have investors, you don't have bankers, you just couldn't pull those types of projects off, knowing that there wasn't the demand for it. And so we had to do some serious pivoting. We really did not lay anyone off. We did not necessarily bring on a lot, but as we pivoted, we almost doubled in size since the pandemic. And so we've hired over 200 people in the last year and a half. And so that pivot was an important factor, not only in the various and different paths we went down, but then now all of a sudden we're in those situations where those hotels are now back and we're in mid construction development. Some of them are open, or one of them's open today. So not only the pivot, but also then that stuff that kind of got laid off for a couple of years really helped us with maintaining the employment and actually growing quite significantly since then.
Well, good for you. I'm going to shift gears now. I think you know that Family Enterprise USA advocates for family businesses at a national level in Washington, D.C. And we represent all sizes of businesses and all industries. So I have to ask the question, how has legislation, tax and economic legislation, affected you and your business? And the second part of that question is there anything that our legislators could do that could help you with the family as well as the business? Because we focus on those tax and economic issues that affect the families of the business, not so much the business itself. So are there legislation that has happened, that is in place, that has maybe made it difficult? And is there legislation that could help you moving forward?
Well, I think from our world, the most impactful proposals is the taxation of capital gains, and it continues to be brought forward by the administration. And this would not only have a significant impact upon real estate participants, but even those family businesses that if you look at the boomers or the silent gen, they built up significant equity in their businesses. And they're proposing that the federal long-term capital gains tax rate be brought in line with ordinary income rates, which really almost is doubling that, from 24 to 41%. And that's in addition to what's being proposed to limit the deferral of the capital gains on investment property, which is 500,000 per taxpayer, 1 million filed jointly. I think from a succession standpoint, the budget kind of brought back the concept of incurring capital gains, not only when a property is sold, but also when it's transferred through a gift, and such as funding like a grantor trust or upon the death of an owner or owners. A year ago, that proposal included $1 million per person exclusion from this capital gain recognition. However, that provision now has been removed and replaced with $5 million per donor exclusion from gains on those appreciated assets. But it's also my understanding that they're allowing any family business, and I think this includes farms as well, to delay those taxes if businesses continue to be family owned, from what I've heard as of late and operated. And so from our standpoint, that's one of those keys too, and keeping the family and the family business intact and continuing to focus on that successful transition to the next gen. I think there's some concern about future liquidity issues, certainly, for even my wife and I personally, for our kids and their, our heirs, long-term held real estate, and, for family businesses, where the estate may have extremely low basis in the inherited assets, and then therefore having kind of those large unrealized gains. And currently that basis can be stepped up to the current fair market value at the time of death, and heirs can hold and or sell those assets without the burden of the tax gains. However, like what's being proposed at times in this scenario is that step up in that basis, which becomes mute, and a family may have to sell the property just to pay the tax off. And the reality is, if the property is leveraged and or significantly depreciated, the sale of those proceeds could very well be insufficient to cover those taxes. And so there's a lot of work on our side in doing that, getting things put into trust and set aside as quick as possible before some of those changes would be made. As far as, what can be done in our communities or to help us out with our business, we're fortunate in the sense that the areas that we conduct business, unemployment's right around 2%. So we're in more of a need for qualified employees today versus a need to create more jobs at this time. That will probably change in the near future, but I think it's as we continue, or at least we watch the interest rate hikes by the Fed, which have a significant impact on us in tightening the capital markets, and will continue to inhibit our ability to develop, feasible commercial and multifamily housing projects, essentially meeting the expectations of our investors and or key stakeholders. So while Congress, initially set up the Federal Reserve System, I'm not keenly aware that or how much their ability is to influence the decisions of the Fed, the Federal Open Market Commission, knowing that they'll probably likely bump it up. And I think there's some good news yesterday on inflation as a whole, but our position would be to hold it at least where it is today, and then hopefully start to tick that down towards the end of the year end 2023, so that we and others in our industry don't find ourselves facing the reality of potential significant layoffs throughout certainly the construction and real estate development sectors. I think in addition to the ease on the rates, Congress stepping in and keeping the capital in the markets, the stuff we were talking about, the capital gains, it continues to be proposed by the Biden administration for the 2024 budget, is that doubling of that capital gains tax, which drastically impacts the reinvestment and overall leverage of funds for real estate investment, I think throughout our entire economy, and then I think even general consumer spending as a whole. And so I think those are the things that align really close to us and our family business. I think somewhat aligns with other family businesses that aren't necessarily in real estate as well.
Well, that's very helpful input, Chris. I really appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. Increasing capital gains would be very devastating to a lot of family businesses, certainly one like yours in the real estate industry. And then elimination of step up in basis. Unfortunately, there are proposals right now in the Senate that would do that. We're very concerned about that as well, because I think it's lost on a lot of people, including members of Congress, that you get that step up because you pay a 40% on the full market value of the assets. And so if you eliminate step up, you could potentially have that appreciation on their assets being paid over and over again, generation after generation, on the same appreciation. So we're totally in agreement with you. We think it's very destructive to family businesses. And so we're really trying to communicate that to members of Congress. So we appreciate your input. And we really appreciate your time on the call today. So thank you so much. Thank you for being available, and thank you for all of your input.
Yeah, thank you guys for all your advocacy, and appreciate what you guys do. And I'm honored to be asked to be a part of this. And so, yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Have a great day.